Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Ummahpreneur live podcast, where I interview Muslim entrepreneurs that are at the top of their game or creating something interesting or beneficial to the Ummah. And today I have a really, really special, interesting guest, and it is Brother Abdul-Rahman Abbas. And my guest today, he's the co-founder of a new privacy-focused Muslim prayer app called Pillars, which actually, I just found out 2 seconds ago, hit $40,000, mashallah. So I did want to shout out that in the intro. And he's also the co-founder of a social enterprise called Medmentor, which is a company that aims to empower aspiring medical students with all the tools they need to gain an equal opportunity at a career in medicine. So lots to discuss today. And of course, lots of value to be had through our discussion. And I look forward to learning with you guys in this episode. Assalamu alaikum, Abdul-Rahman. Thank you for being here.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
It's always a pleasure to speak to people like yourself and entrepreneurs like you who are creating these amazing businesses, because I always tell people that listen to this podcast, I think the person that enjoys the podcast the most is me, because I get to ask all the questions that I want and I get to have all the information that I want. So it's always a pleasure, mashallah. So I love to start out this podcast by asking you a little bit about your background, sharing with me a little bit about who you are, what you do, and also what inspired you to create the Pillars app. What was it? What kind of moment or what kind of event happened that inspired you to go forward in that direction?
Yeah. So my name is Abdul-Rahman. I've grown up in the UK, United Kingdom. I am in London pretty much for my whole life since I was born. And I guess my parents, they were immigrants. So my mum's from Palestine. My dad's from Iraq. They came here to essentially for their careers and for their degrees. And ever since then, so they grew up here, and I was born in London, in Chelsea, if anyone knows the soccer club, quite close to there. And now I'm a medical student at University College London. I'm in my 5th year, so I'm entering my final year now. And yeah, with regards to Pillars, so essentially the story it's an interesting story. My co-founder Tariq and we both studied at UCL. He's a computer science student, and during November 2020, I'm not sure if you or the listeners remember, but what happened was that a motherboard, so Vice, if you know the news agency Vice, they essentially reported that a very popular app, which had maybe 100 million users, had essentially been sharing data with a third party, and the data was Muslim locations. So the users of that app, their location data was being shared, and that third party was linked with the US military. And so obviously, as you can imagine, a lot of Muslims got really upset about that. They felt a huge sense of betrayal, and there was an outpour of essentially disgust on social media, and people were very upset. People were calling for others to delete the app and essentially raise awareness. So at that time, Tariq and I can't remember who initiated the call, but we contacted each other on WhatsApp. We'd already been friends for a good while. At university, we'd met at a society event, and he essentially said to me, or I said to him, why don't we just build a solution to this? We were quite surprised that the options out there were not necessarily the nicest apps to use. And we were also surprised that a lot of those apps had ads as well. And there were already issues with the app before this privacy kind of scandal had occurred. And we thought we could do a better job, to be honest with you. And initially, the idea was just to set up a very, very quick project, like a 1-week project. We thought we'd open source it. And by open sourcing, I mean, we'd essentially create the app and make it available, the code available in the community, so that people could kind of build on it and it becomes a sort of community project. And we thought we'd do that in only a week, and we'd do it very quickly. And that was sort of like our gift, or a sort of response from the community as a result of this. But as time goes on, we decide to kind of take this more seriously, I guess, and we decide to say, actually, there's a lot of things that we could potentially do with this. And so we build the app in about 4 or 5 weeks. We do it full time. We do a sprint. I'm designing. Tariq, my co-founder, he's developing, coding the app. And alhamdulillah, in the last 10 days of Ramadan, I believe it was when we decided to launch the app. There were still things that we didn't have ready, but we thought We really wanted to get it out in Ramadan. We really wanted people to, and a lot of people were asking us to essentially to launch it. We'd gained this amazing community on Twitter. We'd had like over 4,000 signups on our waiting list to try the app, because we'd been sharing designs. The community had been engaging with us, asking what we had planned, and we would ask them what they wanted from the app. And we were regularly, even the name Pillars was something that we got as a result of engage with the community. We did polls, and we had 4 names, and we let people pick, and one of them was Pillars, and Pillars was the winner. And yeah, we launched, and alhamdulillah, we launched, and I think we got 15,000 downloads extremely quickly. And then from then we're about over 3 months now, and we're about 40,000. So that was the sort of story and the kind of trigger of what started this whole journey.
I love it, brother. I want to know specifically for you, what is it that made you feel like, because a lot of people will look at what you built as a business, and I get a lot of questions similar to this, which is, there's a lot of other people that have a successful business in this industry, or that have successful business that are doing this specific thing. Why would I launch something else? It's already being done, right? And this objection comes up a lot when I speak to aspiring entrepreneurs. They feel like if there's already someone doing it, that means that's it. There's no opportunity there. And of course, clearly, one of the motivating factors for you, as you've mentioned, was the fact that you've seen and you've experienced that there was an existing, we call this an incumbent in business, but there was an existing incumbent in the market, which is someone who led the market. And they weren't doing a job that was quite satisfactory because of the privacy concerns, et cetera. And you saw that opportunity to go in. Now, what made you feel like you could still, like that opportunity was there? And what made you feel like, you know what, I'm going to go for it? Because a lot of people do get ideas. I'm sure a lot of people saw this, notification, or this, this article that essentially said that this app was sharing their data. And a lot of people had an idea, well, I wish there was an app that didn't share their data. But you're a medical student, and to go and build a tech app is a stretch. So what is it that made you feel like, you know what, not only do I feel like we need this, but I'm going to go and I'm going to decide to build it? What is it within you that you think made you take that decision?
It's a good question. And something that happened when we launched the app is we did get a lot of those messages from people saying, I had a similar idea, but for one reason or another, I didn't end up building like an app as a result. And it is worth saying that there are a lot of apps on the App Store when you search for a prayer time. We're definitely not the only alternative. There's thousands, I think, of other prayer apps. I think for a lot of people, and I was probably of a similar mindset, when I approach something, I want to do something completely unique. I want to do something that's very I want to essentially create something very original and something that people have never seen before. And this is going to be like my startup idea. But I think something that's very, very missing in a lot of entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs' mindsets is that actually there's a lot of spaces that are ripe for disruption that are already kind of being served, but being served quite badly. And so if you look in a lot of spaces, there is a lot of chances where you can essentially think, how can I do this but better? And that's all we did, really. We didn't come up with a magic way of calculating prayer times. We didn't kind of do anything in that sense. But what we did do is we looked at what was available and we thought, this is not good enough. And it's true that we thought that kind of before this happened, but I think when that article was released and this whole scandal happened, and having already kind of built things in the past, kind of reduces the barrier to entry of I could actually create a solution. I think when anyone learns to code, for example, or learns to build things, it's very it's transformative in the way that you think about problems. Because in the past, you would come across a problem and you might complain, but you won't really know, you won't go further than that because you don't have the tools to be able to fix it. But when you do learn these things or have access to kind of friends where you can partner with them and work with them, like I did with Tariq. So I was able to contribute the design side and Tariq was able to contribute with the coding side of things. When you have that, you've done things like that before where you built, so both of us actually had already built websites or apps in the beforehand, and that makes us approach this problem very differently. And we look at it and we think, we could do this. This is definitely a manageable and doable things. And I think the advice would be for people who are maybe not too sure would always be get stuck in. It can be a small problem. It's sometimes very daunting, but when you get stuck in, it changes your, I don't want to be very, very over the top and say it changes your life, but in a way it does, because it does make you think, it makes you think, well, I can do something about that. And that's exactly the mentality. And we've even got a screenshot of our messages that we sent to each other when this first happened. And it was very casual. It was like, well, why don't we just do it ourselves? Let's build it. And that's literally how it all started.
I have a question for you, because in that same vein, when you mentioned, you partnered with a friend that you had, Tariq, specifically to develop this app, I wanted to ask you, because of course you're from a background of medicine and studying medicine, and I believe, are you already graduated? Are you working? Or are you still on that path?
Final year, so I'm 1 year away from graduating, inshallah.
Okay, mashallah, amazing. So you're on that path, which is not app development, right? So
yeah.
Did you? One thing I wanted to ask you is, did you? And that was a question that you kind of touched upon, but I'd love more details. Which is, did you or your co-founder Tariq have a software development background, or did you hire an agency to help you build? Or was it, you, as you mentioned, you brought in the design, and then you had your friend Tariq, who had a background in development, and then you could bring those two talents together?
Me and Tariq, both of us actually don't have the skills to do what we did via our degrees. So even though Tariq, who comes from a sort of mathematical computational background, actually, to be more specific, he doesn't learn app development as part of his course.
Okay.
And I obviously don't learn designing or marketing or business from my course as medicine. Yeah. But there's obviously still overlaps in terms of the skills. So that's worth considering. So for example, even the way that I talk to patients and the way that I kind of communicate, there are skills there that is helpful when I'm talking to customers and trying to find out what the pain points are for customers. But putting that aside, what I'm trying to say really is that we both had to self-teach ourselves quite a lot to get to where we are now. And fortunately, things have become easier. So Tariq had to self-teach himself to app develop. We use Flutter is the code base, which makes things easier as well, because Flutter means when you code on Flutter, you sort of you only have one code base, and you're automatically able to provide a Android and Apple app. So you don't need to kind of do two different code bases natively. So Tariq had to self-teach that. And for me, during one of my years at medical school, it's kind of it's not a gap year, but it's like an intercalation year where we do more research-based things. We have a bit more free time, and so I self-taught myself design. So I didn't even do a course. All I did was I downloaded an app called Sketch. It's very similar to Figma, if people know that. And I just basically started to kind of create these ideas. I'm one of those people who have lots of ideas. So I just sort of create concepts of those apps, and obviously when you're not coding them, you can design them much quicker. So it's very nice. You can create prototypes and things like that using Sketch, which is quite nice. And both of us self-taught ourselves in that sense. And then when we came in, obviously with regards to Pillars specifically, when that idea came, we were using those skills that we'd kind of independently learned outside of our kind of degrees or education. And to touch on your other question with regards to whether we did it ourselves or agency, so obviously we did this ourselves, and I would generally advise people not to use an agency, actually. And the reason I say that is because I think it's difficult to explain this in a very quick manner, but essentially when you're building a kind of app or website or an idea to start off with, it's very easy to be very concentrated on the solution and your product or service, and essentially forget why you're building it and what the problem is you're trying to solve. In reality, you should be someone who is very much in touch with your customer all the time. And if you're building the solution, you have direct control over it. When you're like the intermediate person between the customer and understanding their problems, and then the agency and trying to communicate to them what features you think should be in place, I don't think you're best placed for that. On top of that, there are other benefits, like it's very expensive usually to use an agency, more often than not. And now there's also the huge rise of no-code tools, and those have kind of completely changed the game, to be honest with you. Even so you mentioned Medmentor, which is my other kind of social enterprise. That's completely built on no-code. Pillars isn't. Pillars is a bit more complex than that, but no code is rising, and to quickly summarize no code, it's essentially helping people build very advanced kind of softwares, or softwares that would be previously considered too advanced to do without code, but using essentially drag and drop sort of tools. It's a bit more complex than that, but it's essentially a much quicker and simpler version of building things using code. So you kind of skip that whole process of learning how to code and all of that. And so no code has meant that a lot of people can become essentially creators a lot more easily than in the past.
All right, that's really interesting that you share that. And so you guys really were able, mashallah, to actually create this whole thing from scratch yourselves, from all the way from the development phase to now the launch phase, correct? So it's still you two. Did you hire anyone else in the team since then, or is it still you two right now working on this?
No, it's just us two. I get some help from my brother with the marketing, especially when things were getting very heated up in terms of a lot of engagement on social media. But otherwise, it's just us two with the designers, developers, and marketers.
Amazing, mashallah. So since then, you've launched, I mean, if I remember correctly from when I read your bio and the information, so this idea, I believe, if I remember correctly, was, came to be in November of last year, and you've launched pretty quickly since then, right? So this is a launch, when you talk about like idea to app launch, was an idea to app launch in under 12 months, which actually doesn't happen very often. And it's really impressive, mashallah. So you actually approached like a lean and mean strategy to get to market fast, which is something that I absolutely love in entrepreneurship. And I think every person should approach that strategy when they're building a business. So, I want to ask you, can you walk us through what is that approach that you took, why you took that approach, and how did you go about it, to launch so quickly? Is it that you focused on with the essentials and then you went and built out based on that, or, what was that process like for you?
Yeah. So actually, even though the idea we had in November, there was a gap because when that report was released, we didn't actually have, we were both very busy. So whilst we wanted to work on this, we both kind of went back after the kind of hype had died down to what we were doing before. And it was only until about February that we actually made kind of contact, in the sense that we started to say, let's start building it. So it's actually much shorter than 12 months. The actual time from building and like kind of having like starting work on the app in a serious sense was about maybe 1 or 2 months. And I think generally speaking, most ideas in terms of their MVP, so their bare bones, should technically take something, well, maybe not 1 to 2 months, but under 6 months really. And this is also one of the reasons why I say don't use an agency, because the tendency there is to kind of try and build what is a perfect product, your finished end product, with all the kind of bells and whistles, all the gadgets, all the features that you could ever want from your idea. But really what you want to do is, as you were saying, and I'm really glad you said this, which is trying to build it as quickly as possible. So I think the saying is move fast, break things, is a kind of classic Silicon Valley saying. But really what you want to do is understand as quickly as possible if people really want what you're building. Obviously, you want to do research before that to identify the problems that they have. And so for us, the problem was so obvious, like we didn't even need to do research to understand it, because everyone was kind of like, you were getting Omar Suleiman and like very large and influential kind of Muslim influencers, if you want to call them that, to essentially like with outrage on social media about privacy. So we knew privacy was a concern, and we knew ads was also an issue based on our own experiences and people's experiences. And so we kind of knew that the problem was very obvious. But what we were keen on when we came to building the app is our app itself doesn't actually have an incredible amount of features compared to other apps. So if you were to compare us to the like next 9 apps in terms of prayer apps that are out there, you won't necessarily find that our app has like 1 million times more features than those. But what you probably, if anything, our app probably has less features. But what we did is we focused on what were the biggest issues instead. And the biggest issues don't tend to be that they want more features. The biggest issues tend to be things like there are ads, or that there are privacy issues. Your data is being collected, and the design is not intuitive, and it feels overwhelming, and it's not very well built. And so we focused on that. And actually, we regularly had conversations, Tariq and I, about whether we should wait to include another feature. So essentially, should we delay our launch to include this other feature, or should we just launch? And we would regularly say, actually, no, that's not necessary. What we want to do is get the necessary kind of app out there, the very, very core stuff, and get it out. And we left everything else and we said, well, we can add this later. They can come as part of future updates. And that helped us quickly get validation. So that meant that we could see people's response and that we could act on what people were kind of feeding back to us rather than what we thought we should be doing ourselves. And I think that's generally a very important skill, is what they call an MVP, a minimal viable product, is really try and build what is the core product before you try and add all these features. If you think that another feature is going to help you suddenly become successful, if you've built something and people aren't necessarily using it or buying it, adding another feature 9 times out of 10 isn't going to be the reason why it suddenly takes off. Usually you need to reconsider what the core problem is and what your solution is trying to do. And I think that's why it's really helpful to not spend 12 months to like 24 months trying to build, and you still don't know if people actually want what you want. You want to get it out and figure it out sooner rather than later.
Right. I love that answer, mashallah. And so I completely agree with that methodology, because when you look at again, especially right now in this market where everything is global, everything is a little bit more open to essentially everyone, right? As in you create an app or you create a business, your community or your customers are not your local area anymore. It's not just limited to your city or your country. It's usually a global audience. And what that means is it provides opportunities in regards to, you have now this much bigger pool of potential customers that you can work with, but it also provides challenges. And some of them are, for example, speed to market. It's important that you're, lean and mean. You have an approach where, you want to be the first person to connect, to kind of reach your audience or your clients with your solution, and try to be a pioneer of sorts, right? In regards to whatever it is that you're building. So I appreciate you sharing that. And one more question that I have for you is, one thing that I really like about the approach that you guys followed is how you involved your audience and your potential clients or prospects in the development of the software. You've clearly taken an approach, and I've looked at your Twitter and looked at, how you guys have kind of been handling the development process. Did a little bit of stalking, if I may say. And essentially what I saw is that you guys really involved your audience in the development process. You guys were asking them, as you mentioned earlier, what should we call the app? What features do you guys want next? And you're kind of involving people, and you're doing the market research. And I remember even seeing you guys asking a few questions to see, is there even a need for this, right? Is there a need for this app? And so you've clearly, really taken the right steps in terms of building, where a lot of people think they need to come up with the perfect product or like the perfect application. And the way that they're going to do that is by sitting down and brainstorming and writing down a list of things they think their clients want. Whereas you've taken the right approach, which is you actually go to your clients and you ask them what they want, and then you build something based on that. So walk us through that a little bit. Tell me, how did you proceed with the market research, and what would you recommend for someone that is thinking of building an app? What should they be looking out for when it comes to the market research, validating their business idea?
Yeah, so I think if I were to be able to give like 2 kind of recipes for at least 2 factors that are huge factors in our recipe for success, if you want to call it that, that's a subjective thing in itself. But the first thing I would definitely say is the MVP side of things. Don't try and build all the bells and whistles. And the second thing that you mentioned now is, essentially it's something called building in public, and it's been a game changer for me. So this is the first project that I've ever done where I've done this building in public, and what it means is sharing your process. So right from the start of building our app, before we'd even started coding it and we only had like kind of initial designs, I was taking screenshots, I was posting them on social media saying, hey guys, what do you think of this? This is what I'm doing, this is what I'm up to. And obviously down the line, as we get more and more into the building process, we were starting to have things like polls where we're asking people. So one of the things that we did is we asked people, how important is it to you to have a widget? Would you consider switching your prayer app if another one didn't have a widget? And we found from that the majority of people wanted a widget. And so for us, that was a clear indication that actually maybe our first product needs to have a widget as opposed to not. And that can help streamline the process on what's really key and what's not. But I think, yeah, I think so this building in public is really helpful. Why? Because what tends to happen is people think I need to be very secretive. I need to kind of not share my idea and share what I'm working on right up until launch day. When I launch, I'll then have this. I'll then I'll reveal to the world, and everyone will be like amazed by what I built, and then hopefully I'll get lots and lots and lots of customers. But actually, what ends up happening is you end up being in your own bubble. You don't have anyone who's critiquing your idea. And often it is hard to get criticism on your idea because it feels like your baby. You've been working really hard to build it. And you're very passionate about it, but you get essentially in this bubble where you don't know anything about whether this will actually work up until launch day. And so what I really think is something that helped us and hopefully can help others is sharing your process early. The chances are you're not likely to be copied by someone else. The biggest risk that you're having, that you're getting rid of, is the chances of your idea failing, essentially. That's a much bigger risk than the risk of someone else copying you, to be honest with you. And that's something I struggled with, because I struggled with sharing. Like I'm always like, oh, what if someone takes it? But I had to try to overcome that. And I think it's been a transformative kind of experience as a result. And so, yeah, I would say one thing you can do, for example, is so focus on one social media. Don't try and like do everything. That's what we did. We focused on just Twitter. We didn't think, oh, we need to be on every platform. We need to be on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. We're two people. We're very busy. We're also, like I said, we both got degrees, but we're also doing the other parts of the business, like the design and the business side of things and photography, coding side of things. And so we've got to be mindful of that. So we focused on just Twitter, and we set up a website with just a sign up box. Very simple web page, nothing complex about it. And we said, if you want what we're building and here are screenshots of what we're building, sign up here and you'll find out first. And that was also another kind of very strong, this was before we launched the app, obviously. So that was a really good way of figuring out whether people wanted what we were building, because we got 4,000 signups when we did that within about a week or two. And so for us, that was a good indicator before you build. So even now, when someone comes to me with an idea, I sometimes say to them, well, why don't you just quickly design that so you can show people what it would look like and what it would do, describe it, set up a website, and just post that with a like sign up link. Just do that. And then see how many signups you get. Obviously, you might need to do a bit more posting. If you're not active on social media, you might need to work on that a bit. But just do that before you even start building, before you hire an agency, before you start paying tons of money or learning how to do something, and then see how that goes. And if you get a lot of interest, or maybe people push you another direction, that will help you figure out things really early. And you don't have to spend 12 months building something, $10,000, $20,000 or pounds or whatever, paying for something, and then only realizing later. And that's all very disheartening. I've been through that process.
Definitely. I completely agree with that. Always see if you can find like an alternative to building, before building, that where it allows you to test the market demand and really validate that idea before you go all in. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Michelle. We already have a lot of questions coming in from the audience. So guys, if you have any questions in regards to app development or pillars and what they do, or even for Abdul-Rahman himself as one of the co-founders, please drop them in the chat. We'll get to them towards the end of the podcast. But I still got a few questions of my own, so I'm going to put you guys on hold for a bit. So I want to ask you right now, what was the biggest lesson that you learned throughout this process of building and launching pillars?
That's a good question. In any particular manner, or just
it could be personally, like personal growth mindset, or in terms of business development, anything really. But what do you feel was your biggest takeaway so far?
Maybe I've already shared it, but I feel like your idea isn't as valuable as you think. Try and share early on. Because I think something that I've learned the hard way in the past is that I've spent 6 months, I remember, building a product in the past where I then launched it and then only then figured out that it wasn't necessarily the thing that people wanted. There wasn't a demand for it. And I think with this, the really nice thing is that because we were sharing things along the way, people were excited about it even before we'd started building it. And it's really nice when you have that, right? When you have people who are really excited to use what you've got planned, and then you get the motivation to continue building. And even now, like, people are very motivated by what we've got planned in the future. So it's really nice for us to think, let's keep going. And so, I guess the biggest lesson is go to people and ask them to critique your idea. Like, get them to give them your idea and tell them, can you like destroy it for me? Can you really rip it apart and tell me what the problems are with why is this going to fail? Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
No, yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to know for you, do you feel like throughout this process of building a business, because one thing that I do notice for myself is that as you go through a journey like this, and of course your journey is just beginning, mashallah, and there's a lot more to come, and I pray for your success. But as you kind of go through this journey, I feel like the biggest benefit we do ultimately get at the end of the day is who we become through this path and journey of entrepreneurship. Do you feel like this has changed your perspective in any way, or maybe your mindset, or has given you something and on a personal level that you can take away so far from what you've done?
I'd say there's two. Yeah, definitely. There's two main things I'd say. So the first thing is sincerity, just before I forget them. And the second thing is more about prioritizing the process and the journey rather than just the destination. So with sincerity, it's very easy to kind of lose yourself when you're building something. I guess this is more specific to it being a Muslim-based product. It's very easy to kind of lose, essentially forget why you initially started out doing it. It was initially going to be a project that we wanted to give to the community. It still is something that we want to kind of, something that inshallah Allah will reward us for, and something that will benefit the community. And it's really important to, the thing that I've learned is it's really key to make sure that you hold yourself accountable and others accountable, that you don't run away with the, I guess, success. Again, I don't like using that term because success can be defined in a lot of ways, but yeah, essentially, I hope that makes sense. But essentially, it's just make sure that you're accountable yourself. Make sure that you're not getting ahead of yourself, and like it's not getting, I guess, to your head somewhat. And make sure that even Tariq's great. He's amazing because he always reminds me, even indirectly, like he won't necessarily tell me, Abdul-Rahman, you're doing this or this, but he'll do things that makes me think about, like, for example, for a period of time, he decided to leave social media just to disconnect himself from a lot of like the things that were happening, and just make sure that he was like focused, I guess, on his intentions. And I think that was something that made me reflect. The second thing I would say is about the journey. I'm someone who really, really struggles saying I'm going to hustle, so that at the end of the day I can get to where I want to, and I'm not going to like enjoy, or I'm not going to like spend time with my family or friends, and I'm gonna just get my head down. It's all about getting the workout down, and later on I'll have this break. Later on I'll feel that I can essentially relax. And I think that's a really big mistake, because having spoken to a lot of other people and heard their journeys, it's very often that I get that they say that when they get to that destination that they had set for themselves, actually what happens is the goalposts move. That goal becomes further down, and it becomes a bigger goal. So for us, it could have been like getting to 10,000 is our goal, but actually now we're at 40,000. We might be thinking, oh, I want it 1 million. It never really ends. It could be 2 million, 10 million, 20 million, who knows? And so something that I learned about myself, and I regularly ask people around me to remind me about, is to kind of make sure that you enjoy the process of building something, the process of launching a business. Because if you don't, you'll A, burn out, and B, you just won't enjoy the process or your life or the thing you're doing. I mean, what's the purpose of it at the end of the day? It's to obviously to make an impact, but also to give you satisfaction and make sure that you're feeling good about yourself and what you're doing. So don't wait for that for later, because it won't come unless you kind of prioritize it now. Yeah, there's a balance to these things, but I definitely wasn't as balanced as I should have been. I was still working on it actually now.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing that, and I like the point that you made about sincerity, because a lot of times we don't realize, but there's actually, as Muslims, we have a bonus, a little bonus that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us for being Muslims, guys. And I'm gonna share it with you guys right now. And the bonus is this, is that when your niyyah, when your intention, as you mentioned, if you're building something for the ummah, or even if you're building something for Muslims and non-Muslims alike, but your intention, your niyyah is, when you approach your business, that you're approaching it from a place of trying to help and serve others, then that niyyah becomes, I'm trying to help and serve others with the niyyah of helping others, providing for myself, providing for my family, and doing this in a halal manner. Well, now your work becomes almost a form of ibadah, becomes a form of worship, right? So subhanallah, so that is like a little bonus that we get as Muslims, guys. If you look at your intention and you check your sincerity, then that actually allows you, maybe you're getting some good deeds now every time you spend some hours working on your business, right? And who doesn't want that? So I really appreciate you touching upon that point.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, please go ahead. Please add on to it. Let's go.
Just because I really liked what you were saying, and I think it's also worth really highlighting that a lot of people often think that for it to be ibadah, they've got to work on an idea that might only benefit the Muslim community or might only benefit from an Islamic perspective. I mean, Pillars is a prayer app, so it's very obvious where it's helping, right? But yeah. I think people often, something that's really important to us Muslims, something that Allah's actually commanded us to do, is to serve humanity. And serve humanity doesn't mean just Muslims. As long as you're doing something that isn't haram, obviously, you're providing benefit. Anything at all can be an ibadah, as you say. Any business, no, it doesn't have to be a Muslim-based business. As you say, you just got to make sure that your intention is there. If your intention is to serve humanity and provide benefit for the community, regardless of what it is, it could just be in education, in non-Islamic education. It could be in many things. Then inshallah, the reward there is huge. And I think it's important that, because what I think sometimes can happen is Muslims can sometimes box themselves into only one part of, it should be for Muslims to be known for doing lots of things as opposed to just one thing. And inshallah, we can do that.
Inshallah, definitely, brother, definitely. Well, thanks to this podcast, we're discovering a lot of Muslims like yourself who are. So that's awesome. I want to ask you, where do you see your app going in the future? So what is the direction that Pillars is going to take, inshallah, in the months to come?
So I guess what we're now doing is there's two kind of pathways that we can go down. One pathway is focusing on mosques and how we can digitize mosques and essentially connect them better to the community. But actually, and I guess this is a kind of sharing the process and the lessons that we learned. Having spoken to quite a few mosques, I think we realized that we're not quite ready for that yet. And even mosques aren't probably quite ready for it yet. And so we're sort of shifting patterns to the other pathway that we were considering. And the best way to describe this is a sort of what we want to do is really help on the spiritual side of things. There's a lot of these spiritual productivity apps out there, but they're not very much focused on the Muslims community or Muslims in general. It doesn't align because obviously for us, Islam's a way of life. It should come into everything that we do. And so obviously as this productivity hype and spirituality hype and purpose of life hype that's kind of taking off all across the world, especially for non-Muslims. What we really want to do is kind of think about that, but from the Muslim side of things. How can we help provide, build the tools essentially to help Muslims improve themselves and essentially help them elevate themselves from a spiritual and non-spiritual side of things, actually. So that's a very high level explanation of what we want to go down, but we're actually figuring things out ourselves in terms of exactly how we were going to go about that. But we're really excited. The best way we're thinking about it is I think a really nice way is when you're building something that you would use yourself. That's what we're doing now. That's a really nice thing about this kind of pathway that we're going down, is that we are trying to build an app that we're proud of ourselves to use, something that would work for us. And inshallah, if it works really well for us, then we'll be really excited to share it with the rest of the community and the world, really, inshallah.
That's amazing, inshallah. Definitely. Well, I got one more question for you, brother. And this one is a question that I ask every single guest on this podcast before we dive into some audience questions, inshallah. And the question is, if you could meet Abdul-Rahman from a few years ago, I would say even before you started this app and before you even started Medmentor, so before you even started, exploring this entrepreneurship side of you, and you could tell him one thing that he could hold on to as he went through his entrepreneurial journey, what would that one thing be for you? I guess
tawakkal ala Allah, which is put your reliance on Allah. Things will work out. It might not be the first thing that you work on. It might not be the second thing that you work on. But actually, everything that I've done up until now, including all the failures, every single one of them has had a significant lesson involved in it that has meant that if I didn't have that lesson, I wouldn't have been able to, I don't think we would have necessarily had this, Allahu A'lam, but I don't think we necessarily would have had the same level of success with Pillars. So all of those failures were actually part of the success journey of Pillars, if that makes sense. Yeah. And actually, if you just take Pillars in isolation, then I don't think it would have been successful because I wouldn't have had those journeys. I would have learned those lessons through Pillars. So I guess in some ways, as much you can do, obviously, a lot of courses, you can do a lot of online engagement. I think listening to other founders is also a really good source of like learning and understanding their journeys. But as much as you can do all those things, sometimes the failures are necessary for you to be able to become or get the somewhat success at the end of the day.
That's beautiful, mashallah. I love that answer. Tawakkul ala Allah, mashallah. That's really, really nice. Thank you so much for sharing that, bro.
Not at all.
We got a few questions that have come in from the audience. So we're going to actually go and see if we can answer some of those. If that's all right with you?
Inshallah.
Let's do it. Bismillah. So one of the questions that we have here, Bismillah, let's see which one are we going to take from the audience, guys. If you got any more, drop them in the chat. We've already got, I think, 4 or 5 that I'm going to pull up right now. Let's see what we got so far. Mashallah, lots of comments today, guys. Lots of engagement. That's awesome. So we got one here. Let's see. So this one is how long, so it's a privacy question actually, or a data question. How long does Pillars app keep data? Do you have a data retention schedule in place? And did you have to go through any legal or regulatory compliances?
So I'll answer the second part. No, we don't have any regulatory or legal compliances because it's a very simple answer. We don't collect any data whatsoever. So actually, if you open us up on the Apple Store, you'll see that under our app there's no data collected. Having said that, so to answer, we don't keep any data. The location data, which is used to work out your prayer times, because the app does use your location to work out prayer times, but it doesn't store it. So that information is kind of worked out locally on the phone. And then it's sort of that's it. We don't have any backend servers or anything like that stores it. The thing to say though is in the future, it's undoubted, like to be able to do certain features, you will need to have a certain amount of data collection. But we are aware that this is something that's very sensitive. So we're very much thinking about the policies and the ways that we're going to go about that. Some of the suggestions that we've had, and I'd love to hear what your audience think about these, is essentially giving people the option. Some people are very, very sensitive about sharing anything, even if it's anonymized, even if it has no links to their personal information, they still would rather not share any information. And we want to be able to give those people a kind of no data sharing option, which is what the app is now. But for those who want to be able to unlock these features, which rely on specific information, we would like to give them the option, because obviously some of the features that we have planned are things that would require it. And we want to obviously build out and do more than what we are now. Not doing any data at all is very limiting. But where it's possible, where we can avoid any data being used or collected, that's obviously the priority. So inshallah, that's our approach, is a minimal data approach with an opt-in, opt-out system.
I love that, mashallah. And that's actually really transparent, right? So it's like, you know what, we don't even need compliance because we don't keep data. So that's amazing, mashallah. It's really, really cool. So that's I have another interesting question here, more about development. So this one is, many Islamic apps are repetitive in nature, so they're not so appealing. How do you make an app engaging? So, I mean, for you guys, I guess, what was the approach that you guys took to make it more engaging? I know that I really loved the way that it's designed and everything else, but I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, 2 things, I'd say. 2 things that separate, I guess, our app from others, and something that, inshallah, others can take away if they're thinking about a Muslim app, is the design. I think it's very underrated. I think if you look at all there's a lot of apps out there, as I was saying earlier in the podcast, but a lot of them are not necessarily the best in terms of their UI, the user interface, and the user experience. I think getting someone who understands these things or learning it yourself is really, really important and helpful to have. So definitely that's one way to stand out, essentially. The second way to stand out is essentially the community side of things. Now, this is where there's an interesting, so we obviously worked really hard on building a community. There were reasons for this. The first reason was to try and get the work out there, to get people to know that what we're doing. The second reason was to build trust, based on the fact that lots of people felt their trust was broken, even though it might, so I don't want to name the app, but even though that app might not be the only app out there, people were feeling quite reluctant to download the other apps out there, just purely based on that experience. They just felt that they couldn't trust any app. So obviously that was a hurdle that we had to overcome. So we thought the only way we can do that is by talking to the community, by putting ourselves out there, so people knew exactly who the co-founders were behind them. They can see who we are, where we study, what we do, and they can engage with us directly. because the problem is with a lot of these apps is that actually the founders tend to stay behind the scenes and they tend to not put themselves out there. Now, there are good reasons for this Islamically, right? We're going back to sincerity. A lot of people, because of sincerity, they don't want to put their names out there and their faces out there because they want it to be a sincere form of charity. And I completely get that. That's 100% a good, a valid reason for them doing that. The reality is, though, unfortunately, that because trust had been broken, people aren't going to necessarily engage with you unless they feel that they can trust you. So you do just like with a lot of things, like the same way that you'd want to know who is on your mosque board, because you want to know what they're up to, what they're doing with the donation money. You'd want to know who is behind the app because you want to be able to trust them, especially in light of that experience. So I think two things. Really think about design. Design is a superpower. People very much underrate it. If you learn good design, you can often make, our app isn't feature heavy, but because of that, I think it stands out. And the second thing is consider your community early. Very much a strong approach now in business is thinking about what they call distribution. So thinking about building your audience before you even have anything to sell them or anything to give them. That's a very big kind of mentality now. So think about growing your either social media platform and just focus on one. Don't try and do it across lots of things, whether it's on TikTok, inshallah, it's like useful stuff, or on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter or Instagram. Build that community, make it around the sort of topics that you want to be like kind of basing your product on. And then when that's, you can actually use that as well to get feedback directly like we did. And then you can obviously bring in what you were planning on building or what you were building. So inshallah, that's helpful.
100%. And that's actually really interesting that you share that, because I shared that with a student recently who was interested in building an app. And it was all about that, right? Which is, it's so important to build an audience now in advance, so you can right away start to do market research, understand what they want, and you have, a pool of users that when you do release, they're ready to consume and test it out for you and give you feedback. So that's always so important, because if you're launching and then you're trying to build an audience, it's much more difficult. So we got two more here that I'd love to bring up, inshallah. One other one here is, do you think if an app is made free of charge, it loses its value, or the other way around, does it make it more popular? It's an interesting question.
It's a very good question, actually. I think you need the question, it needs to consider the audience. So the type of audience. So when you're like thinking about selling something or building something, you need to think about what is the sort of persona of the person that you're trying to get across to. I think there are, in the very productivity focused based things, those people tend to have more cash to spend, and they tend to be more up for paying for productivity tools. For those sorts of people, they do value a paid sort of service. They do see more value in something that's paid. And even if it might reduce the number of users, they would still prefer that. And for the builder, the creator, they'll probably make more money than if they had a free and paid version sort of thing. So there's that person that you can think about. There's another group, and I think with Muslims, there is a reluctance usually to subscribe to something. Generally speaking, I don't want to brush everyone with tarnish everyone with the same brush, but there is a reluctance, and you do need to offer what I call upfront value. So you need to provide something for free, and then once you've kind of proven yourself, if you want to call it that, you can then provide them a paid alternative, which provides even more value that they now can pay for. And the reason they're more likely to pay for that is because they know you, they trust you, they use your free product, they know like the quality that you provide. So it's definitely a debate. People said to us that they would prefer if our app was like £1 to buy, because it meant that they knew at least that we had money, which meant that we didn't need to rely on privacy things. But I don't think we would have got to 40,000 or anywhere near 40,000 if we did that, to be honest. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know if people would consider getting the pillars if it was £1, £2, or $1, $2. Yeah.
So that actually brings me to the next question, and we'll kind of wrap up with this one, guys. So if you have any more questions, drop them in the comments, and I'll see if Abdul-Rahman can go answer them later on in the group. But we got one more here, and this one is: so how do you generate revenue when you don't include ads in your app, or in your case as well, you're not charging for the app? So what's your revenue model? So
we don't have a revenue model at the moment. So our app is completely free at the moment. Fortunately, because we don't have agency costs, or we're not hiring a kind of external developer, all the skills we have in-house, me and Tariq, between ourselves, alhamdulillah, we cover all bases. at the main commitment at the moment is time.
Yeah.
And I think the £100 that Apple asks for the developer license for the app development, and the £40 that I think Google asks for.
Yeah.
But largely speaking, that's it. So and obviously we're wary that there's essentially that's it. But we are the plan is going forward is to have an in-app subscription, but we don't want to. It's not. We don't believe ads is a suitable. A player app is a suitable place for ads essentially. So we don't want to monetize through ads. And the problem with ads also is there's a data privacy issue, because when you have ads, you need to sort of track people for it to be a very efficient and ads experience, because you don't know, if you don't have tracking, then you don't know what people are interested in, which means you can't show them the specific ads. So it's less valuable if you don't do that, and that's kind of against our ethos in its essence. So we kind of push that to the side, and that's not something that we want to do to monetize. The way that we want to monetize is by providing what we have for free, and that's always going to be for free, the current app, but inshallah providing even more amazing features that will be of significant value, that the community will be able to think, this is something that I really, really want, and I think is worthwhile subscribing to. It's a challenge for us to build something that is that useful, but at the end of the day, that's what you should be. You don't really want to be conning people out of their money, right? You want to, inshallah, feel quite satisfied about providing a product that people really want to use, and that's our aim. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, brother. And I think, definitely, I really like what you said, which is, you're keeping your mission in the forefront, and you realize that if your mission is to create an app that is more privacy centric and focused on the user and making sure that their data is secure, you don't want to do the ads direction. And then I think definitely at that point, a subscription model is something that is viable and something that you can look into for extra features, or even for people who want to support you. And I'm sure there are many people who do want to support the work that you're doing, mashallah, and want to take benefit in it, because there's barakah in it, in helping people. Someone opens the app, gets notified, oh, I need to go pray. That might be a hasana your way, right? So, inshallah. So that's definitely something that that people usually want to be part of and support. So, how can people, in that same vein, how can people go and support you and download the app and just keep track of what you guys are up to, inshallah, moving forward, so they can stay in touch and stay up to date?
Yeah, of course. So the best way, obviously, is to download the app. So you can search Pillars on the Apple Play Store. You can also go to our website, thepillarsapp.com, and you can follow the links there. Yeah, that's perfect. And the other way, so you can follow me on social media, on Twitter specifically. I'm most active on there, at AS-Abbas, so ASABBAS 98. And to be honest with you, the best way that you can support us at the moment, because there's not quite yet a financial way to support us, so please do, if we have an in-app purchase, please do support us that way, because that is going to be one of the main ways of supporting us in the future. The best way to do it now is to download and share it, really. Sharing it across your WhatsApp groups, with your families, on your social media. That is probably the main way that we've managed to get to 40,000, is people's support and people's essentially people wanting to share it with their family, friends. I've looked at people who download it on their parents' phones, that sort of thing. So it's very nice. And download the app and share it, inshallah, with as many people as you can across your social media groups.
I love that, mashallah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and so generously sharing your time and your knowledge with us today. I know I've learned a lot personally about, app development, software development, and so many nuggets that I can take away from this episode and apply in my own business. And I'm sure that many people who listen will be able to do the same as well, guys. So please go ahead, and if you're listening to this, go and search Pillars on the App Store or the Android App Store. Give it a download and share it with your friends. Share it in the WhatsApp groups. Let people know this is a privacy-centric Muslim prayer app. They don't have ads right now. They don't even collect any data, right? So it's amazing, mashallah. And honestly, I tried it myself. The design is absolutely beautiful. It even tracks, like the position of the sun throughout the day, so you get to see that, and that's pretty cool as well. So definitely go and give it a download and share it, inshallah. Abdul-Rahman, thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast.
Barakallahu feek. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. No, I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, brother. We enjoyed it a lot more. So we appreciate having you here. And guys, you know the drill with this podcast. So if you enjoyed this episode, you're listening, and you've been benefiting from our content lately, we'd love it if you could just, as well, share this podcast with your friends, give us a rating, on the App Store or iTunes podcast, wherever you're listening to. And of course, if you'd like help with your business, you want a little bit more hands-on help, you're thinking of starting a business, or you already have a business and you want to scale up, we're right now offering calls where we can, map out a business plan with you and see if we can work together, inshallah. And you can take advantage of that at ummahpreneur.com/call. So go to ummahpreneur.com/call. You can book a call with our team there and we'll speak to you to see how we can help you build your business, inshallah. Thank you so much, guys. Take care. See you next episode. Assalamu alaikum.